Somewhere tonight, a person will roll over in bed and say something out loud. A name, a sentence, sometimes a full argument with someone who isn't there. They won't remember any of it in the morning. The person next to them will remember every word. Sleep talking happens to a huge number of people, at least occasionally, and almost nobody does it on purpose. So what's actually happening in your brain when words come out of your mouth while the rest of you is completely unconscious? To understand that, we need to look at what sleep actually is, because it's a lot less off than most people assume. Let's start with a basic misconception.
Sleep isn't a single switch that flips your brain from on to off. It's a series of different stages, each with its own distinct pattern of brain activity. Some stages are deep and slow. Others, especially REM sleep, look almost as electrically active as being awake. Sleep talking, technically called somniloquy, can happen during almost any of these stages, and which stage it happens in changes what the talking actually looks like. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the earlier part of the night, sleep talking tends to be simple, mumbling, a single word, a short groan-like phrase that barely resembles language at all. That's because during this stage, the parts of your brain responsible for complex thought and coordinated speech are largely offline.
What comes out is closer to a reflex than a sentence, your vocal cords getting triggered without much of a message behind them. REM sleep is a different story entirely. This is the stage most associated with vivid dreaming, and sleep talking here tends to be more complex, more emotional, occasionally even conversational. Here's the strange part. Normally, during REM sleep, your body goes through something called REM atonia, a temporary paralysis that keeps you from physically acting out your dreams. Your brain is vivid and active. Your muscles are almost completely locked down. But that locking mechanism isn't perfect. Sometimes a small crack forms in it, and a fragment of whatever's happening in the dream leaks out through your voice, even while the rest of your body stays still. This is why sleep-talking phrases can sound so oddly specific and so disconnected from anything happening in real life. You're not narrating your actual surroundings, you're leaking a fragment of an internal experience that has its own logic, its own characters, its own stakes, none of which map onto the room you're actually sleeping in. The part of your brain generating language is active. The part of your brain that normally filters, edits, and contextualizes what you say before it comes out is significantly less active. Nothing is checking the sentence before it leaves your mouth. This also explains why sleep talkers almost never remember doing it. Memory formation during sleep works very differently than memory formation while awake, especially in deeper stages. Whatever brief burst of language happened simply doesn't get written into long-term memory the way a normal waking conversation would. From the sleep talker's perspective, the sentence never happened. From everyone else in the room, it very much did. There's also a strange social dimension to sleep talking that most people don't think about. The listener almost always remembers more than the speaker does, which creates a strange asymmetry. One person unknowingly generates the sentence, and the other person carries it forward as a memory, sometimes for years. A sleep-talked phrase can become part of a couple's shared history, a running joke, or an oddly specific line repeated back for decades, even though the person who said it has absolutely no memory of ever saying it. Some people sleep talk far more often than others, and there are a few reasons why. Sleep talking tends to run in families, suggesting a genetic component to how leaky that speech-blocking mechanism is for a given person. It also spikes during stress, sleep deprivation, fever, and alcohol use, all things that disrupt normal sleep architecture and make the transitions between stages messier. A messier transition means more opportunities for something to slip through that normally wouldn't. Children also sleep talk more frequently than adults, likely because their sleep cycles and brain development are still stabilizing. Animals show a version of this too. Dogs often bark, whimper, or growl during sleep, especially during REM-like states, their paws twitching as if they're running.
Researchers believe this reflects a similar leak in the same kind of paralysis system, fragments of a dream managing to escape through the body's motor or vocal pathways, despite the brain's best efforts to keep everything locked down. It's not unique to humans. It may simply be more noticeable in us because we use complex language instead of barks or twitches. For the vast majority of people, sleep talking is completely harmless. It's classified as a parasomnia, an umbrella term for unusual behaviors during sleep. But on its own, it typically requires no treatment at all.
It doesn't mean you're having a nightmare. It doesn't mean something is wrong with your brain. It doesn't even necessarily mean you're dreaming about whatever you said. It's simply a small signal leaking out from an otherwise sealed system. In rarer cases, frequent or unusually intense sleep talking can be associated with other sleep disorders, including night terrors or a rare condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, where the muscle paralysis fails much more significantly, allowing people to physically act out dream content instead of just vocalizing pieces of it. But for the overwhelming majority of casual sleep talkers, none of that applies. It's simply an ordinary, if occasionally embarrassing, side effect of how imperfect the sleeping brain's systems are. Researchers who study sleep talking in laboratory settings have found that the content isn't entirely random either.
It often reflects real emotional undercurrents, unresolved stress from the day, a conversation that didn't go the way someone wanted, anxiety about an upcoming event, even if the specific words don't make literal sense. The brain isn't reciting the day's transcript, it's processing something emotionally relevant and occasionally letting a distorted, dreamlike version of it slip out as sound. What's genuinely interesting about sleep talking is what it reveals about consciousness itself. We tend to think of asleep and awake as two clean, separate categories, but sleep talking is proof that the boundary is much blurrier than that. Fragments of waking-level brain function, language production, emotional expression, even brief moments of apparent responsiveness can flicker on for a few seconds inside a brain that is, by every other measure, completely unconscious.
You're not really talking in your sleep. A small, temporary piece of an awake brain is talking through a sleeping one. Maybe that's the real story behind every mumbled sentence in the middle of the night. It was never really about secrets slipping out or dreams being confessed. It's a reminder that sleep was never as simple as off. Somewhere behind the stillness and the closed eyes, tiny fragments of an active mind are still flickering through, occasionally finding their way out through your voice, saying something to a room that, as far as you're concerned, you were never even in.